Bonjour, habari za leo. My name is Kevin Mutia.
Solofina Nekesa.
Lauren Arnza.
Ryan Fisher, Professional Officer at ICLE Africa. On behalf of ICLE Africa, the African Center for Cities, our future cities, and partners, I'm excited to welcome all of you to the Rise Africa 2021 Action Festival.
Rise Africa has been growing as a platform of thinkers, doers, enablers, committed to inspiring action for sustainable cities.
Rise Africa is about building active networks across academia, government, private sector, civil society, and the arts.
Our entry point is based not on articulating problems followed by proposing solutions, but rather on celebrating our cities as places of innovation and culture, while asking what more we can do to make them sustainable, inclusive, and vibrant.
This festival is hosting 46 sessions over 5 days from across 16 countries in Africa and the world. Every session aims to share new ideas, showcase ongoing actions, and launch new initiatives by bringing participants together to chart a new route forward.
We hope that the festival program will inspire you to commit to one or more specific actions that you or your organizations will take on. As this session closes, you will be redirected to a survey in which you can articulate these actions. We will follow up on this committed action throughout the year and offer resources, connections, and support. In this way, we are testing the idea that events can galvanize action, and we hope that you will join us in this effort.
Beyond this session, there are many ways to take part in the festival.
Register for further sessions.
Vote for your favorites in the photo competition.
Test your knowledge of African cities from our daily quiz.
Watch a variety of inspiring video provocations.
And listen and dance to the Rise Africa 2021 playlist.
We hope that you will make all attempts to reach out to new people and build lasting connections.
Before we begin, it's important to note that this session is being recorded and that by participating, you are consenting to be recorded. All recordings will be available on the program page after the festival.
Creative expression is vital for creating new futures for our cities. So we invite you to enter this session in the spirit of creativity and dreaming.
When inspired fires fly. We are moving into the city again this morning. Our dreams tucked under our arms and the bags under our eyes overflowing with hope. We are moving the city again out of mourning, cleaning our streams of consciousness with floodlight ideas to illuminate the workings of our inner scope. We've masked our intentions anew. We've strengthened our bones, calcified our resilience, and merged stillness with our minds, using breath as the sinew. We continue to forge a dreamscape across an arid land held hostage by reality. We are watering smiles into the cracks in the concrete. Reinventing laughter to sprout and fill the lulls in our conversations. Yes, our windows open towards brick walls, but our eyes are the source of sunlight. We are living temples of light, moving across the cityscapes, mobile street lamps, the reflection of the heavens we rose from.
Welcome to the session, which is supported by Open House Lagos. It's called Memories of the City. A little bit about, my name is Papa Omotayo. I'm an architect based in Lagos, Nigeria, and I'm also one of the trustees for Open House Lagos. So a little bit about Open House Lagos before we start the session and introduce our panelists that I'm going to be talking to today. So Open House Lagos is part of the Open House Worldwide, and it's been running for about 5-6 years now. And it's a weekend in the city of Lagos that sort of gives the citizens access to buildings, architecture, to promote urbanism and architecture in the city. it's one of the few times, if you know Lagos well, that many buildings that are normally inaccessible are accessible. And we do this through a series of tours that take residents or tourists alike around the city to show them different buildings. And within that, we have a theme every year. So this year's theme is about the idea of memories in the city. And part of our discussion today is sort of asking about how the idea of cities, spaces, architecture speak to our idea of collective memory, whether we're talking about public spaces, whether we're talking about individual buildings, whether we're talking about institutions, cultural institutions, and just this very powerful idea of how architecture, the city is sort of tied to this collective memory that we all have that sort of moves beyond time and moves beyond space, and how we explore that and how we engage with that. So we have some questions in the Q&A, which I'd love for everybody to participate and speak about. We had two speakers today, two panelists talking to me, and we're doing a virtual tour of the JK Randall Cultural Institute, which is one of the most important cultural projects that is going to, that I guess symbolizes this idea of collective memory and expands on it, because it's just also about the memory of a culture, in this case, the Yoruba culture, which is predominant in southwest Nigeria and very predominant within the city of Lagos, which this project sits. So we have Seun Oduwole, who's the principal architect of CISA, who is also the, the project driver, the curator, the energy behind this amazing project, and what will be a global institution that will recognize not just the history of Yoruba culture, but also sort of define a very particular area of Lagos, the historical quarter of Onikan, Lagos Island. But I'll let him speak a little bit about that. We did have Ayinka Doseku Adeji, who is a principal architect of Studio Contra, but unfortunately she won't be able to make it for personal reasons. So Seun and I are going to be here, and we're just going to have a chat. I'd love you, Seun, if you could say hi, and then I'll do a little bit of an introduction. So Seun Oduwole is a principal architect of CISA. He's a graduate of Nottingham University in the UK. And CISA are known to do very high quality, high technical, institutional, cultural, and residential buildings, working in Lagos, Abuja, in the UK. So it's really great to have Seun here with us. He's a friend, he's a colleague, and we're really excited for him to show us JK Randall project that he's been working on and take us through it. Seun, I'd love for you to just to sort of like introduce yourself a little bit and perhaps just talk a little bit about CISA as a practice, and then we can kind of like maybe just go live to JK Randall's site, and you can just tell us a little bit about the project, and then we can literally, because I know the project itself has a really strong tie to the idea of memory and collective memory, because the project itself, especially the specifics of the site, has such resonance within the memory of that particular part of Lagos Island. So I'm going to hand over to you, and maybe you can just sort of like tell us a little bit more about CISA and the project.
Thanks very much, Papa. Hello, everyone. As Papa said, my name is Seun Oduwole. I'm an architect I had a studio in Yaba, Lagos mainland, called CISA, stands for Studio Imagine Simply Architecture. We're a studio of about 10. We work mainly in Lagos in Nigeria, but we have some other projects on the continent, and we have lots of partnerships in other continents as well, in Europe, in the UK, and working on a number of things in Accra and some other places. So we focus mainly on institutional buildings, commercial buildings, but we do residential. We have done a bit of retail. And at the moment, so, as Papa said, the project that we are working on now, which I guess is our flagship project, is the JK Randall Center for Yoruba History and Culture. So it's part architecture, it's part urban regeneration, it's part culture, it's part sort of space and place making. It started about 4 years ago in 2016. There's a lot of history to the site. So as part of our brief, one of the things that we looked at was tapping into that history and the memories of that space, of that area. It's in Onikon, to inform the brief and to drive the architecture, to use those as sort of design cues, visual metaphors, whatever you want to call it, to drive the architecture and the message as well. So we started in 2016, like I said. There was an existing, it starts from a swimming pool. There was an existing swimming pool that was built originally in 1928. So we came up with a proposal to renovate that swimming pool. The swimming pool was built in 1928 by a gentleman called Dr. Randall. Now, Onikon is right in the heart. It's right in the heart of Lagos. It was very, very close to the British seat of power when Lagos was still under colonial rule. And so the swimming pool was built in the middle of this park called King George V Park, which was a 19th century park. And so it was built, so Dr. Randall built it so Lagosians could learn, how to swim, because water transport was one of the islands, mainland, and were quite a few islands. So swimming pool worked, till the middle of the 1970s or so. He passed away, I think, 1955. A hall was built in his memory, but that hall was knocked down sometime in the mid 2010s. So we looked at the area, and it's very rich in Yoruba history. There's a national museum, which is a federal museum, which is right across the street. There's a Yoruba tennis club. There's an island club, which was the first private members club for locals, because Ikoyi Club was the first private members club, but it was for white people only. So there's a lot of history that was that is in that area. So we looked at tapping into that. So I'll ask Dami he's on site now, and so I'll talk about the history and talk about the construction, and the plan for the exhibition as well. So Dami, if you can hear me, can you switch your camera on? I hope you're at the swimming pool area. Dami? Yeah, there he is. Right. Perhaps, do we need to make him, okay, is he a co-host? Can everyone see? Does he need to be pinned? Do we need to swap screens or something? Okay, there we go. Yeah, so Dami, Joe, just gonna move back a little bit. So I'm saying, yeah, okay. So as I said, the swimming pool was originally built in 1928, but it fell into disrepair sometime in the 70s. So our first proposal was to renovate the swimming pool. So as I said, this project, it's more like an urban regen project, so we've got some architecture which takes its cues from the space, from the history, and from the subject matter. But the entire site is about a hectare. So what we looked to do, it was 3 different sites where we took the fences down to combine it as a single site. So the swimming pool site, the museum, the cultural center site, and then there was a little sort of pathway in between. So we knocked the fences down, made it one site. And then, so the first part is this swimming pool here. So it was a much smaller pool, which we made bigger. So it's 25 meters, half the length of an Olympic pool, and it's got 2 smaller paddling pools that can be used for kids. So the entire ground floor is for swimmers, and then the upper floor is more of a hangout, chill out area for the rest of Lagosians to just sort of come, maybe in the afternoon and in the evening on a weekend. So it's putting, I mean, one of the things we looked at a few years ago was the loss of public open spaces and recreational spaces in Lagos, and seeing as this was built as early as 1928, you know, we thought it'd only be right and fair to put it back in, but, you know, modernize it as well. So we've got, you know, up-to-date facilities, changing rooms, lockers, his and hers lockers, his and hers showers, shops, swim shops, and whatever else. Well, you know, most of the facilities you would need for a public swimming pool. So Damijo, if you can just walk towards the pavilion, take your right, and then just walk up the stairs up to the pavilion area. So to the left, the shaded area, you know, you'd have seating for swimmers. And so to your right here, you can see changing rooms. You know, go up the stairs, please. Up the stairs. Yes, thank you. So to the right there were the changing rooms, offices, ticketing, lifeguard rooms. Okay, so get to the top of the stairs, look to the right. You can stay under the shade and then look to the right. So to the right here is one of the pavilion areas. So this would be more chill out lounge for swimmers and non-swimmers, you know, so we'll have, you know, sofas, outdoor furniture here, and then just go to the left. Yeah, so out here is more sort of formal seating, hangout, dining area, just sort of open, so that you've got cross ventilation both sides and it's completely open to the public. There are 3 restaurants. There's one to the right and then there are 2 further on. So the idea is that the restaurants would be tiered, serving local food, continental food, and then one would be a bar type space. So you've got a mix of restaurant tiers to cater to as many sort of varying palettes as possible. Just go straight down. Left, straight down. Thank you. Yeah, that way. And so what we did as well is we bridged these spaces and allowed stop. Yeah, so just look to the right here. So we allowed these sort of transient spaces for pop-ups, you know, because I mean, one of the areas we looked to was, you know, was marketplace. The idea of marketplace, you know, in places like Lagos, a lot of markets are very informal, you know, daily activity. People come in the morning, they set up shop, they pack up, and then they leave. Okay, you can keep walking. So the idea was we can have these sorts of spaces between the formalized spaces that allow for transient activity. So you can get a pop-up of maybe an ice cream vendor or akara seller or whatever it is. So further down to the end, there's one of the restaurants. So just go in and look at the restaurant. So we've got a wide corridor here, about 2-point-something meters, to allow circulation, but also outdoor seating for dining, al fresco dining. Just looking out onto the landscape. So this is one of the restaurants which will be fitted as a white box for a tenant to come in and fit out. So there's kitchens, serveries, changing rooms for staff at the back, toilets and whatnot. Okay, thanks. So come out, Dami, and then just look out across the street, Joe. Yeah, so just look out across the street, or across the site. So on the other, so over there is the actual center building. So it's still a construction site at the moment, but the idea is everywhere you're looking at now will be landscaped. So we're looking to bring back some of that King George V Park into the site. So what you would have is you'd have these 3 event spaces, the center building, the restaurant block, and the swimming pool in the middle of this park, or sort of on the periphery of this, you know, on the periphery of the site with the park in the middle. So down there where you're looking at is a sort of village square, market square, which runs axial to the entrance. So there's a tunnel. If you look at the tunnel, Dami, so that tunnel is the access off the main road. So you come in through the tunnel into this square onto the park. So either side of this square will be grass. So the entire site from west to east is landscaped except for this square here. Okay, so Dami, just walk down to the exhibition entrance. So the apex of the curve of that building was where the memorial hall was, the hall that was built in memory of Dr. Randall. It was built in 1955, I believe. So what we did was, as best as we could, we tried to situate our building exactly where the memorial hall was, you know, so that's why it followed the curve, which is the shape of the fractal. But what it also helped us to do was to keep the center of the site as open as possible for, you know, for green space, for public engagement, for activity, for informal, you know, activity generation. There was an old amphitheater there, I think in 1960. So we put another amphitheater back in to just sort of help foster opportunities for these activities and informal interactions, you know, so dance troupes or play settings or whatever else, you know, can happen here, you know, programmed activities, and people can just walk off the street and just watch these activities, or they can come through here. Okay, so if you stand, just go stand under the tunnel, Dami, and then look across back to the restaurant block. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, so, you know, this is just looking back from where he came from. So he stood at the restaurant at the top. So there's a restaurant at the bottom, which sort of faces the square. And so the idea is that restaurant would serve local food, and the one above would be more continental. And then the one to the swimming pool would be another type of restaurant. And then this space here is where it sort of evokes the idea of the old town square, the old market square, where you can just have additional informal activities happening on this square as well. And then landscape, trees, covered areas for people to just sort of sit down, chill. To the left there's a water feature that we've got to just sort of help aerate, create sort of, you know, some oxygen to just help aerate the space and make it slightly cooler. It runs into a trough, which is in front of the restaurants. That's looking at the mini amphitheater, which is in the well, you know, of this curve. We'll talk about the fabric. We'll talk about the facade later on. But just go into. Where's he gone? Hello, Dami, are you there?
Yeah. Maybe while Dami's getting back, I can also just I can maybe just share the video as well. So maybe you can just talk until we get Dami back. Does that work?
Yeah, that works. I mean, it's shown most of the site anyway, so we'll see if we can get him back.
And so the Tyrian bit is twofold. So from a functional,
I think. Do you want to talk?
Once we apply it, we don't have to worry as
yeah.
as we
you want to mute
the pins in terms of having to maintain the building.
You want to mute Shagun though, so that we're not sort of cross talking.
Yeah, I've done that.
Right. Okay, let's try and get to, okay, so he was talking about material. So one of the things we looked at when we think about the architecture was how we could evoke the idea of the past, of the architecture of the past, you know, the rustic nature of how buildings were built using Adobe. So initially we thought about using Adobe, but we couldn't for structural reasons. So we ended up with the idea of using concrete and then a tyroline application. So a tyroline is a cement, sand, and pigment base that's sprayed on by hand. It's very old school. It's very sort of craft based, but it gives you a rich texture. So what we did was because the topography in the southwest, you know, it runs from sort of very rich to a bit clay. So we worked with two color schemes, which was the rich red that you see here, and then the sort of the clay, more terracotta, you know, type of look. So we focused on having the center building redder, and then the restaurant buildings and the other buildings slightly more orange at the top, more terracotta at the top. So there were three trees. Just talking about the size and context. There were 3.5 trees. Well, not 3.5, 4. There was one that was sort of partially cut down. So there were 3.5 trees or 4 trees on the site when we got there. So the half the tree we took down because it sort of it clashed with the edge of the building, but the other 3 trees we left and worked around because they're about 120 years old. So we left the trees and then we designed around them because we thought it was important to keep the trees there, and they also provide shade and sort of shaded spaces when people walk around. What we did was the glass, because so the exhibition hall is on the 1st floor, and then the ground floor houses community facilities. So we've got library, co-working space, temporary exhibition space, we've got gift shop, seminar rooms, multi-purpose rooms. And so with the glass, we wanted it clear. We wanted the glass clear. We didn't want it tinted because we wanted people to be able to see the activities going on, within the space. And we kept the fences low as well, so that the space felt, people felt welcome and attracted to the space. And so the glass, what we did was we got a list of the 346 Yoruba towns and villages and cities in the Southwest and used that as a motif, sandblast motif on the glass, because we thought that would be quite a nice feature, quite an interactive feature for people to walk up to the glass and see if they can find the name of their town or their village. So it starts, people start to interact with the building in a different way, and then it provides some sort of buffer between the outside and the glass and then the activities going on internally. The screen you can see there behind was an attempt to sort of express the craft skill of the Yorubas, because the Yorubas are very, very, very craft based, very skilled based. Historically, Yorubas were renowned for metalwork skill, either for fashioning weapons for war or for tools for agriculture. And so it wasn't just the men as well, but also for weaving. So there's a big sort of craft weaving skill, making clothes, basket weaving, just sort of weaving in general. So we try to express this through this sort of woven or deconstructed woven lattice that wraps around the building. There's a Yoruba fabric called ashoke. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. It's called ashoke, means sort of high cloth, expensive cloth. It's clothing that people wear, for events such as weddings, funerals, birth ceremonies, things like that. So we modeled the screen of ashoke because it's sort of multi-layered and it's woven with an old loom. So that sort of tessellated, slightly disorganized look is actually quite intentional because it's supposed to mimic ashoke fabric. Yeah, so this goes back. This is looking back at the Papa. This keeps playing in a loop. Is there another video? Which is like
two things for me personally.
What do you want to go? Do you want to see?
Well, I mean, I've tried to pick up, the main elements on the video. So I've spoken about the glass wall. I've spoken about the cladding, which is still going on. Very, very, very stressful and difficult, but I think we're getting. And then on the roof. So one of the concepts we had for the building is Yoruba is very rich with proverbs. Most African languages are, but there's a very sort of
center project has
philosophical base to the language. There are a lot of proverbs, a lot of idioms. Yorubas are seen as very progressive.
Behind the green roof, so you can actually take a walk.
Yeah, she's talking about the roof. So one of the things we looked to do was to have the building come from the earth, because there are many, proverbs that speak about people of Yoruba origin, you know, coming from the soil, you know, being from the earth, being the salt of the earth, and returning back to the earth. So we thought we'd use that as a metaphor, have the building come out the ground, curve and rise to an apex, and then come back down, you know, which sort of speaks to the idea of reincarnation as well, which is quite big in Yoruba culture. The building leans forward, you know, 9 degrees as a sort of expression of Yoruba progressiveness. We've got the screen. So, you know, so there were lots of metaphors that we tried to use in the building to generate ideas, but to also sort of ground it, you know, in context. And so part of the reason why we had the green roof was to increase the amount of usable space, interactive space, green space, you know, on the entire site. So, you know, it becomes another opportunity for people in the area to interact with the building, run to the top, you know, maybe we something at the top, you know, have a private exhibition or something, so that there's a surprise when people, you know, make the effort to walk all the way up to the top of the green lawn and hang out. And then it also gives you really nice views of Lagos Island. You can see the Atlantic, Eco Atlantic development city. You can see Apapa, where you know, which is the port area. You can also see, you know, some of the other green parts of Lagos Island. So it does give you quite nice when you walk all the way to the top of the building, of the green lawn.
I wonder if we could get, I'm not sure where Dami is. It'd be quite nice to get him to kind of walk up the lawn, but if that's not possible, maybe
no, you should be able to. You should be able to. Let me find out. Hang on, let me just for a minute.
Hey, Dami, that's great.
Hi, Dami. Okay, fantastic. Yeah, do you want to walk up?
Let me just spotlight him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm walking up the lawn.
Yeah, so we're still early stages of sorting the green roof out. So we built it with a geocell. So it's a geocell, I think about 350 deep on top of a concrete slab and about 6 layers of liquid sprayed insulation. And then so I think we planted this about 4 or 5 weeks ago. So it's still fairly new. We're still making good, but it's starting to sprout. Touch wood, it grows very. But yeah, I mean, the idea is, you know, we've got this big, expansive lawn that goes at a high level. It's quite wide. That just allows interaction, play, bit of fun. I don't think there's any precedent for this in the country. I know our landscaper keeps saying it's the largest roof in sub-Saharan Africa. I don't know if that's true or not, you know, so I just let him say that. But yeah, so
it'd be great, Dami, I guess if you can like give us some of, because I think what is so important about this location, obviously we've talked a little bit about like its historical relevance of the site and the museum, but also just like how it sits within the city and how, you know, how it sits on the site and the visibility of this location, you know, especially when you get to this.
Dami, okay, Dami, pan round, and then go to the edge. Yeah, once you're done panning around, Joe, go to the edge and just stand on the plinth by the AC area, and then just sort of pan around.
And I think what's so exciting about, you know, what the kind of memories this place is going to create for the citizens of Lagos is it's like something totally unique. I think this idea spaces being above ground level, is something that is quite novel. I don't think, we've sort of explored the opportunities of rooftops or the idea of like views in the city as being part of the language of communal design, especially.
That means your pants to Awolowo Road. Go to the Awolowo Road end. Papa, what you're saying is quite valid. Maybe when Dami's done, I can share screen because I've actually got some drone shots.
That's fantastic.
That showed the building sort of sat in context. So you can see Five Carry Creek. You can see the old National Museum. You can see Island Club, and some of Muson Center. So the old buildings that were there. So even from this level, you can see how green some of Onikon is, and like I said, a lot of these trees are 100, just keep walking down, 100, plus years old. So we were quite adamant that, we couldn't cut these down, that they had to stay there, because Lagos is very hot, and it's not the most walkable city, so one of the things we wanted to create out. So this is a good view looking down Awolowo Road from the top, from the rooftop. So one of the things that we wanted to do was, have not necessarily a quiet space, but a habitable space where you can come, catch a break, get some shade, hang out. It gets very, very breezy here as well, especially when you're in the shade. And so we just create these clusters of shaded spaces around the site, old trees, new trees, overhangs, from the building, and then these transient spaces that just allow, informal engagement and interaction, for people, for the public.
I think for me, that's one of the most exciting things about this project, is this, with the risk of overstating it, just the layers of what this project is trying to do in terms of archive memory, very specific to Yoruba culture, and then introduce those stories and those memories. And I know one of the things that you're doing as part of the curating process is this idea of collective making. There's a real participatory sense within the curation of the project, but also just this idea now of all these, what this space has been designed to really allow people to see the city in a different way. Because, even just looking on this, and, I feel like I know this part of Lagos very well, but I haven't seen these views before. So I'm so excited to be able to see that. I mean, maybe you could share, actually it would be great to, maybe Dan, you can stop, maybe Sean, you can just share, and then we can just talk a little bit about the wider context, and then maybe we could just talk a little bit more about just this idea of this type of approach to architecture and urban design. I know we have some. I know we put some questions in the Q&A, so it'd be great if anybody on the list can see some of the questions we put forward. I think they're in the Q&A.
Okay, Dami Oshe, you can. Perhaps he doesn't need to go inside, right? We'll just pick up on context. I don't think we need to talk about.
Thanks, Dami.
Yeah, thanks, Dami. Oshe. Yeah, you can switch off now. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, let me. Okay. Dami, you can switch off your camera now. Yeah, okay. Let me share Let me share screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this image is quite helpful because it shows
Fantastic.
yeah, it shows building context. So you can see can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's 5 Carrot Creek. Yeah, down there. So this is the swimming pool area. So the old swimming pool. So this entire area, you know, all the way down to the east that way, was an old park. And then so this is Island Club. So this was the first indigenous private members club, and I think that was built
So
in
that's
19.
top right. Your cursor is right. The
Yeah,
gray
top
building.
right. I think that was built in 1946.
And
Here
what used
is
to happen at Island Club in the 40s? Was it like a predominantly colonial? Was it a colonial establishment, or was something that was
yes.
built by the Lagosians?
Yeah, no, it was colonial establishment, and so I think there was a law there was an uprising about the fact that all these establishments did not allow indigenous people, you know, membership. So I think in 1940 something that was changed. And then so up here is the Yoruba Tennis Club as well. I think that was built in sometime in the 1930s. It fails me. To the left here is the National Museum. Yeah, I'll just go to the next image. Can you see this? I'll just flick through. I mean, this is just a drone shot straight down, so you know it shows you how how we spaced it. So we got the building to hug, you know, the edge of the site. You know, we've got the amphitheater in the crest of the well of the site. So main entrance gate is right opposite this big cluster of trees. The National Museum is out of shot. So that's the main gate in, and then there's the through route through the tunnel into the space. You turn left, go into the center, or you come into the square, and then from the square you go left, or you turn right if you're standing in the space to come to the swimming pool area, or you just go straight into the restaurant spaces, or you know there will be activities or whatever else in the park, so you can just sort of hang out in the park, chill out, you know, sit underneath a tree or a cluster of trees, or whatever you want to do, or go up the roof. But yeah, you can see how green. Behind is Muson Center, which was one of the first sort of institutional cultural buildings in this area.
It's pretty interesting because obviously down the road from this is TBS.
Is Skiback, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, obviously some people who aren't Lagosians may not understand that, like, this whole area, moving to the left of this slide, you have like Tafawa Balewa Square, which was
further down this road.
Further down this road. So this entire area was sort of like the center of, I mean, originally was the center of like British administration, but then it sort of moved through independence in the 1960s and then became sort of like the center of civic and cultural engagement. And, you know, post the 80s and post the 90s, a lot of these spaces have sort of not being utilized. And they've kind of, I wouldn't even say they've become privatized, but they've become significantly inaccessible, you know, whether that's through to like a majority is due to politics, but also just kind of like an unwillingness to engage in creating accessible public space. So like you know, we discussed earlier, the original swimming pool itself, you know, had become run down, and it was a space that allowed people to learn how to swim collectively. You know, the center allowed people to come and engage in culture. And as you kind of see on the top left there, that this is like one of the biggest, largest ceremonial spaces in Lagos. It used to be an old racehorse that was built for Queen Elizabeth, but it's sort of been abandoned, and it's now sort of acts as like a space for weddings and concerts and religious events. So I think what's really exciting about what the ambitions of JK Randall is it's the opportunity of it just revitalizing this entire district, and like just so exciting seeing it from this visual as well, and seeing how it kind of like speaks to what was a really, really green urban area. You know what I mean? There was a real civic sense of people walking and moving through all of these different cultural and institutional spaces that are sort of littered around this part of Lagos Island, and like this view in the top to my pet peeve in Lagos, which is Echo Atlantic, but we'll say that for another discussion.
Yeah, let's not talk about that one.
Yeah. But again, it's really interesting. And just speaking about like the hopes for, I guess, public engagement in this space, how do you see it kind of working in terms of like the accessibility? Because obviously we thinking about I think it would be naive for us as architects working in a place like Lagos to fail to understand the realities, right? Some of the realities are there's massive inequality. There's conflict between I guess regulation and local ownership. There's also this idea that Lagos Island itself has such a deep history, and and I know in building this space, so many people have engaged with you and told their own stories about what this place means to their family or what this area means to their community, and it's interesting how they're going to react to, or how have they reacted to this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very valid point, and the honest answer is, I hope it works successfully. I mean, I think when you look at Lagos as a city, it's sort of very fragmented, and I think us as architects, designers, urbanists, one of the things we need to try and do, at least with as much control as we can muster, is to try and humanize our cities, and to use architecture as a tool for community collaboration and engagement, to make spaces that will attract people, that people will gravitate to, that people won't feel alienated from. So I remember one of the big discussion points we had was fences. And I think I made fence at 1.2 meters high, or 1.4 meters high. I was adamant that yes, we do need a fence, but the fence needs to be low, it needs to be see-through, because of what I would like people to do is be able to sort of look through or past the fence at the activities going on. And even the entrance gate, 2 sliding gates that just slide away and slide open in the daytime. So you literally just walk off the street through this wide tunnel into the space. And so, we've on site for 3 years. So even over the course of the 3-year construction period, we've had a lot of interest from people around the area. And, we walk them in, we take them around, we show it to them, tell them the history of the place. People come and ask us, oh, why are you building a swimming pool in the middle of the city? And we say, oh, we're not building it, we're renovating it. It was here in 1928. My granddad learned how to swim in that pool, and, the first response is shock. They can't believe that a swimming pool was actually built in Lagos, in the heart of Lagos Island in 1928, that this was a park before, and you start to tell that story, and you see interest get piqued, you see excitement builds in, people come and say, so you mean I can actually come here with my kids, with my grandkids, you know, on a Sunday, on a Saturday, you know, and the idea, and that's the idea, you know, I tell them absolutely, you know, I am speaking to the state at the moment, trying to sort out, you know, the system, the framework to make, you know, to make it run, to make it accessible, you know, if it will be ticketed and if it will be discounted and whatever else, so that, you know, you don't, those barriers to entry are broken down, so that the architecture at the start is not offensive, it's not intimidating, it's open, it's welcoming, but then the system as well, you know, doesn't serve to drive and shut people, you know, people out, and so that's one of the reasons why we try to create these, you know, these different spaces, areas of engagement. And, you know, even the tunnel, you know, the tunnel serves as, I think there's a shot, I'm looking for a shot of, the tunnel serves as a sort of, as a vista, you know, because it's, you know, the museum, and there's a congregation point across the street. And so we've got the square right opposite the tunnel. So if there's a performance, some, you know, activity going on there, the gates are wide open, you've got a clear line of sight, you know, if you're walking past through the tunnel, which gives you a frame to view whatever activity is going on, you know, in the square. You can't see the entrance of the tunnel because it's a big tree.
I think that this idea of, like, you know, like the things that make spaces live in people's minds is how they're used, right? You know, you mentioned, you know, there has to be an emotional connection to a space, like a building, and I think that's partly, and I think for me, I always think about what, you know, when people ask the question, and it actually leads on to one of the questions in the Q&A that I'm seeing. Please, there's a poll up, but if you also have a question, please just put it up in the Q&A. There's a question from Adepozi Adeogun, who actually sort of ties to my question, which is this idea of, like, this idea that in allowing people to participate or feeling a sense of ownership in the project, it sort of helps that project become more sustainable. So, you know, when we talk about sustainability, and we talk about it from, you know, ecological point of view, I think there's also this idea, especially on the continent, about, you know, how do we maintain or sustain these huge institutional projects, right? Which on the surface follow sort of typical Western models of institution, you know, a museum, exactly, you know, we know, you know, like you've talked about traditional Yoruba culture, how things are presented, how things, you know, what things are made. And I think what's important, and I think Adeposi's question talks about it, is he said how he would like to know what caused the degradation of the space originally and how that has been addressed by the regeneration project. So, you know, I guess it's just speaking on this fact that there was this space created for an activity that was public, and that was stopped, and then the space became, you know, it degraded, and then the building became no use anymore. Part of I guess the question is, why did that building become no longer useful, and why did that space become no longer relevant? And how do you maintain relevance with this particular project, thinking about the future?
Well, yeah, direct answer to that question is the space fell into disrepair in 1976 when the military came in. Because I think Lagos state government came under military rule. I mean, the entire country came under military rule. And I think there was a law that was passed in 1976 that made all land, all institutions, property of the federal government.
Yes.
So, yeah. So that was, you know, so that was a big reason, because there was a trust that was built by, there was a trust that was set up by Dr. Randall's friends. I think sometime in the 50s, and that trust was responsible for the upkeep of the swimming pool and the memorial hall. But I think, you know, when the military came in the 70s, that responsibility got taken away and passed over to the Public Works Division of Lagos State at the time. under the military government, and I think from there it was just a downward slope, from there. So fast forward to this period, one of the things that we've looked at is, as part of our work, is setting up the framework, the organizational framework for the project. So a new board of trustees has been set up, which absorbs some of the members of the old trust, at least the surviving members of the old trust. And the board is a combination. It's a combination of public officials and private officials. So that was the first thing that we did, and that we proposed, and it was accepted, so that there will be custodians of the center who at least have a history, who have a tied history to the origin of the project, right? So there is a sort of not personal, emotional, and professional interest into making sure that the interests of the building, at least, or the building in the interest of the public, are well maintained. And then we're currently working with some financial advisors and cultural advisors, setting up the operational system. So we're talking to people about setting up the SPV for how it's going to run, the maintenance system, the operation system. And we do have some partnerships. So we have a partnership with the British Museum. At the moment, we're talking to the Yale Institute of Preservation and Culture. We have a tentative agreement with the University of Leeds, who have offered to put together training, programs. The British Museum are offering. We are getting work back from the British Museum as part of this whole restitution, return, and conversation. But in addition to that, they are offering sort of partnership assistance with operations, programming, training, all of that, because there really isn't a precedent, for what we're doing. And then, so there's an SPV that will be set up independent to run and manage the state. So the restaurants, will be tenanted, run through this institution, on a merit-based system as much as possible, so that you maintain quality levels, because this place at some point has to generate some sort of revenue, right, to offset the capital that's been put in. And you can only generate adequate revenue if you've got a certain level of quality, right, and consistency. So there's a lot of work going behind the scenes to set up that system.
Yeah, and I think that's the challenge for the continent as a whole, where when we're trying to create, the reality is that we're talking about spaces that allow for collective participation, that allow for collective memory, and most of that happens within public spaces, galleries, interact spaces that there's allow for collective interactive, but there's not a huge amount of government subsidies or government funding for these sorts of projects, right? And the private sector as well, these are long-term projects that require huge amounts of capital, and not just initial capital, right? The need to just understand how, and a project like this is not just a building, right? It's an entire institution.
No.
It's
an ecosystem.
And it's an entire system, an ecosystem that needs to last for years and years. So I think it's really interesting, because obviously this is something at a massive scale. I think it'd be interesting, to maybe discuss or maybe hear your thoughts on maybe smaller, more intimate opportunities that you see or you've experienced in other cities or in Lagos that perhaps can may be able to give that same sense of, I guess, a collective or more collective experience.
I mean, I look at this different, yeah. I'm slightly more optimistic in my belief that whatever system we create will run. because I mean, if I think back 4 years ago, when this was just an idea, perhaps you remember, when it was just a pie in the sky concept, and a lot of feedback that we got was this would never happen. Nobody's ever going to do something like this in Lagos. Nobody builds, institutional recreational projects for the public, at this sort of level, at this sort of scale. That was the feedback. But fast forward
by Nigeria,
here we are.
Nobody, you know what I mean, by African architects. That's the thing that used to drive me crazy about.
Oh yeah, there's that. there's that, right? And there's an analogy that I use, when I talk to people, rewind back to 1999, right? 1998, 1999, where the major mode of telecommunication, at least in Nigeria, was you'd have to walk down to Nitel or find somebody, one of 100 people, with a mobile phone, in the country. And over a 10-15 year period, you had mobile phone, there was a deregulation of the sector. You had international companies coming up, setting up mobile phone systems. One came, a second one came, TN came, Airtel came, all these guys came. And now the average person has 2 phones. And you've got broadband, you've got Wi-Fi networks, you've got hotspots and whatever else, right? And that system had to be set up, and there was a demand, right? And it was the demand that drove the growth of that sector, right? Because all of the people were able to communicate a lot more easily, and they were willing to pay to access that communication. So I think it'll be a similar thing here. I mean, I think it was Yumi and Tosin that did that exercise in 2016 about interstitial spaces, the loss of public open space, in Lagos, and this was a direct response to that. How many spaces, how many places can the average person in Lagos just go to where you can walk in off the street and just hang out without having to pay money? I see there was a question here where someone said, are some parts of the space free to access?
I was gonna go through those questions actually. So maybe we can start with that, which is from Temba Middleman. First question is, are some parts of the space free to access, or is it only the museum restaurants that cost money?
I mean, the museum will be ticketed because some sort of revenue has to be generated, but we are speaking with the financial guys. We're running the numbers, running the model. There's I believe there's a sort of social responsibility parts. You can't just run every idea based on economics. I think you need to balance things out. Yes, the place has to generate some sort of revenue, but you also need to make it accessible. So there are options that are being looked at. So maybe a day of the week, a window, maybe Tuesday 9 a.m. to noon or 3 p.m. or something can be done either free or subsidized at a very base rate to allow people to come in. Because there's no point building it, jacking up the ticket prices, and then nobody comes. The whole point of creating this space is to draw people in and allow people to use the space. But I mean, that applies to the restaurants and to the actual exhibition museum space. But the ground floor, the co-working space, the temporary exhibition space, the amphitheater, the entire landscape site, there is no charge to come in. You can literally just walk off the street and hang out. So if you just want to sit in the shade, or if you just come hang out in the swimming pool area, you just come and go up the stairs and you sit down. If you want to buy a drink, fine. If you don't want to buy a drink, then you just hang out and catch and shoot or whatever else. I mean, that was our idea, right? And we are hoping to talk quite closely to the management operations systems people, and because I think programming will go a long way to determining the success of the open space. Because how we imagine it is, to just have people, picking up the freedom to just come into the space, like people like Kudus and Co, they can just come, and then just start, doing performances in that square, and then all of a sudden you get a congregation of people, who stand by, who watch, who clap, and then they disperse, after 45 minutes. So, so that's the idea. And then if you want to go into the restaurant, to eat or buy a drink, the option is there. If you want to go into the museum, the option's there. But if you just want to turn around and go home, that's absolutely fine as well.
I think if we just go through some of the questions, maybe we can like talk about them a little bit.
Sure.
Temba says, amazing project. Temba, thank you so much for your question. Lola Ade,
thank you.
And so I think these series of questions is about 3 questions that are also speaking around the same thing. So maybe I'll read them off. So the first one from Lola Ade is, how do we encourage, especially in Nigeria, building culturally relevant public spaces, but also utilizing environmentally friendly local materials fit for the climate we are building in? Great question, Lola.
Great question. Short answer is with great difficulty.
There's also ties into add Gavza Adams. Hi Gavza, thanks for your question. His question to it as well, because his question takes on from that, which is there an aim to bring back some indigenous vegetation that perhaps was on this property before? I think that's a really great question. I think it's a great question because it's about, the space was originally a park, as you sort of mentioned, which had its own vegetation. Obviously, you kept a lot of the trees, your design sort of was sensitive to that, but also there's a lot of opportunities for green space which you've created. So it'd be great to hear your response to maybe both those questions.
I'll pick those 2 up. The first one is like I said, with great difficulty. One of perhaps this, that in Lagos, a lot of times you have to show by doing, because it's easy to talk. And there's this fascination with modernism that has sort of swept that sort of swept the environment, where there's a love for sort of clean lines, white boxes, Pinterest, Instagram type architecture, because it's seductive, and I understand that. But I think with us, our approach is grounded in in context, in texture and materials, in phenomenology. So we try to use our projects to show that you can source materials locally, to reduce your carbon footprint, and you can use them, in quite clever ways, be it metal or adobe or bamboo, tyrene. And I guess the first thing is you need a discerning client. I think that's the first position. You need a client who's willing and ready to take a risk, or willing to trust you to take that risk. Oh, the question's disappeared.
I think you've answered. I think for me, it's also this idea, like you said, is I'm seeing, even in your choice of materials, Ade Shukumbi, his as well. Alainka, who was here from Studio Contra as well. And we're actually starting to see in Nigeria. I know there's more of a push in Francophone countries to really look at how do we deal with this idea of materiality. The insane thing is like 80% of materials used in the construction industry in Nigeria are imported. So it actually doesn't, it's just unsustainable from so many reasons.
We have to remember that construction as an exercise is unsustainable.
Full stop.
Full stop. You can slap as many solar panels as you want. Once the ground.
I think my thing is about this idea of selling the aesthetic, the selling the aesthetic of like what it means to kind of resonate with, with the clients. At the end of the day, as architects, most of the time you're dealing with private clients or institutions or organizations who have their own very like specific, and what I like to say, like Western idea of what aesthetic and beauty is. So I think it's also important for them to be exposed to projects like JK Randall, to be exposed to like the work that they shouldn't be, or Studio Contra, or even in the way that CMD Atelier, in the work Tosin's been doing with the beach houses, and just kind of show them about how you can think about materiality in a different way.
Yeah.
That can inspire a more local approach. And then you didn't answer about the vegetation. What are you going to bring back some indigenous vegetation?
Short answer is yes. We've got a whole, my landscaper is, he's a bit of a sort of proper landscape enthusiast. So he knows the names of Arabella. Yeah, he knows the names of all the trees and all the shrubs that were there. So he's done the layout, which once we're done, with the construction, he comes in last and starts to plant these, so he's got a little nursery somewhere where he's growing these, these shrubs. So all around the site, especially on the periphery, and in between, right in the center, he will, some of those old vegetation that was there, will be planted. But I just wanted to say, so if you look at this image, we've got a setback right across between the building and the street, so all of that's going to be planted as well, apart, including the center of the site. So he's got a very, very, very clever landscape plan. It's got little hills, little mounds, where kids can play and interact with, some flowers that were there before. So I know he's done some research on some of the plants and some of the trees that were in the King George V Park. So we will have some of that there, definitely.
Bene Wisely, who sends an interesting question, speaking about this idea of more public space. He wondered whether you considered using the roofs above the public spaces, I guess the restaurants and open spaces that surround the pool, whether you thought about using the roofs of those to sort of as possible additional public spaces.
What the original plan for that was for panels, was for PV panels.
Right.
But that was taken out for that was value engineered with the hope that maybe we can put that back in. So the short answer to that question was no. We had another use for that, but we had to value engineer it out. Just something that I wanted to pick on before we go to the next question. I think was it Olainka? No, not Olainka. The lady who asked about materials, using local materials that are more responsive to the climate. I think, yeah, Lola. It's one of the things that we have to do as designers. It's our responsibility to look for creative ways to work new ways with old materials, to make it appealing. That's our job as architects. That's our job as urbanists and creatives. How can you take some of these materials and rework it in a way that would be appealing to someone who's not technical? It's not easy to do, because you're trying to convince someone to give you money to sort of experiment, whereas they've got an image in their head of some sort of classical type facade and order, or some sort of modernist building, whatever else, so there are some people who have tried, as Papa has mentioned, Ade, has done a lot. We've done, some buildings in Abuja where we've used stone, we've used natural stone, we've used Tyrolean as well, and we've used glass, and we've used steel, so you sort of try and modernize these materials so that they're more palatable, I guess, and use them in sort of creative and unique ways, because people like to touch things. People come into the site, they touch the wall and they ask, is this real sand, is it real dirt? We use wood, and then so people like texture, people are drawn to warmth, texture, light, volume. So and I hope as more buildings come out like this, then the public will be more sensitized and and more receptive, so I think it's like a relay. Ade and his and people like him have done something, we're doing something, and then we hope that some other guys, Contra, you know, Papa's done something, and then other guys coming after us, you know, will pick up, take it to the next level. The guys come after them, pick it up, take it to the next level.
So Vic, I think we've got like another 10 minutes. But yeah. Vic, she's Vic. I don't know if it could be Victoria. Vic, it sounds like Victoria. She's asking, how do you protect people from falling off the green roof? Very, very good question. I know there's the parapet is quite high.
Yeah, they're grab bars.
We fear lives. I'm not sure anyone's going to be.
I don't know if you can see from this image, but either side of the parapet wall, they're grab bars. So if you have, I mean, there'll be a disclaimer: if you're not sure-footed, don't go up. But if you must, you know, there's a walkway around the edge with a grab bar, so you can literally just sort of grab your way up and let yourself down. So either side of the parapet wall, there are grab bars.
How many meters is it?
I hope that answers the question.
How many meters is it? I'm just thinking about like getting the kids to do like relay races up and down.
Yeah, I wouldn't encourage that, man. It's quite a steep drop, you know. You see, because in the exhibition, if you look at this image, it's quite a steep rise and then it bottoms out, because we needed to generate that height quite aggressively in the exhibition hall, because it goes from a single height space to Victoria just sent another question to a double height space. Yeah, will kids be allowed up there? Good question. Absolutely, as long as they're minded. You know, it's as long as they're minded, absolutely. I mean, kids of certain age, you know, if you know, kids under the age of, you know, sort of 7, 8, 9 would have to be taken up with, you know, with a minder. But older kids, I mean, we imagine, you know, people sort of running up and down, you know, or rolling up and down, whatever else, you know. I mean, that's why it's grass, it's well padded, and you know, so the hope is we won't have accidents, but you can't completely police what people will do. Okay, I think for me, maybe we can just talk about I guess my own question. Which I think we kind of sharing screen or yeah, I mean, we can sharing screen. We can just chat a little bit. Yeah, I've actually found an old image from there's an aerial photo from 1929. Oh wow. Yeah, let me pull that up. I can just leave that up, and then we can talk, because I think it's a black and white photo, but at least you get enough of an idea of there we go. It's can you see it now? It's still coming. Yes. All right, okay. So where are we? Yeah, so that's the race course. Remember? So the site is over here somewhere. Oh wow. Behind this cluster of trees somewhere. So that's the lagoon. That's Parrot Creek. That's TBS, which used to be the race course. Remember the race course that you spoke about? Yeah, there. And then the National Museum is somewhere there. Yeah, and then so this was the old government house. Dr. Randall's surgery, his hospital, was somewhere along this coastline. So there was a jetty there, and so that was where all of this started from. You know, whenever, you know, people go from this jetty to maybe Badagry, Korodu, and if there was an accident, the currents would wash. Sorry, bit morbid story, but the currents would wash the corpses back, you know, to the line there, and sort of more in front of Dr. Randall's hospital. So he now came down here and said, "Can you guys build a pool so that people can stop dying and drowning when the boat's capsized?" And they said no. but if you want to build it somewhere in the park, you know, we can give you a spot. And they did, you know, and he went, you know, he went and he built it, you know, over there somewhere. You know, so that's the history. That's the history of the site. If you look at, you know, it's dated up there, 6 November, you know, 2019. That's when this photo was taken. So you can see how, you know, the area has developed from what it was in 1929 to the pictures that I showed you before I pulled this up.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. Like my last question, I wanted us to talk about. Somebody just actually asked something very similar in the Q&A. So maybe I'm just gonna 1929. Yes, Vincent.
Yes.
I will say again. He said this space feels just right for the location it's set, and I absolutely love it. However, I wonder if this is the answer to the many questions regarding, quote, the African public space, end quote. One being whether it has to be tied with these infrastructural developments. So again, it's just a question of like how do we on the continent create public space outside of institutional or infrastructural developments? Because infrastructural and institutional developments are extremely expensive. They require a huge amount of resources and programming. And I think it'd be very naive to think that you know, that kind of level of investment in programming is something that exists within our systems. I think we can all say that it actually doesn't. How we culturally engaged within culture and how we naturally program public space, it's never been in such formalized spaces. And I think this is sort of also the question is, like the scale of this, do you see the scale of it as being sort of a one-off, and there are different iterations that are happening in, I guess, more decentralized local settings that do not require infrastructure, this much institutional support? Or you think this is actually the model that makes the most sense?
It's a difficult one. No. I mean, I'll try. It's a difficult one. But I mean, what I think is, I think we need to understand the city as a series of different layers of systems, right? And before you get to our layer, which is space and placemaking, you've got to think about the drivers, you know, of the city. You know, outside of socioeconomic, you've got the political, you've got the policy, right? And I think this happens everywhere across the world. You know, not just on the continent, but probably, you know, more exacerbated here. That it's usually economic motivations that drive, you know, policy making, and end up, you know, sort of leaving us, you know, the artists, the urbanists, the architects with, you know, with limited frameworks with which we can be creative, you know, to create these spaces, you know, because if you look at how cities develop, or how cities maybe on the continent have developed over the last, you know, decade, if there isn't a direct and informed framework to humanize the city, to protect the end user by making allowances for these public places or public spaces, then, you know, we're just going to end up with developer-led cities, you know, brownfield sites just being, and greenfield sites just being taken over, and then, you know, city blocks of development, shopping centers, flats, offices, you know, you just end up with, you know, with these concrete blocks, you know. So I think before it gets to us, you know, it's and maybe that's with more creative people getting involved in politics and policy discussions, or whatever else. I think it has to be a sort of multi-pronged approach. So there has to be reworkings at the policy level, right, to make allowances, for things like that. And I mean, this project was a complete accident. Papa, you understand the history. So it was an accident that we jumped on, and through good fortune, series of events, and the fact that we had an interest in urban regen and history and memory and knowledge of the area, and we had an opportunity as architects, as designers, to try and merge these interests together to create a space that can be used by the public. You know what I mean? So it was a sort of confluence of fortunate events. But I think, like I said to someone earlier, a lot of times we have to show by doing, because the last precedent for public open space, maybe Morio-Gonla Park, which is completely cut off, right? Because it's completely sort of bordered by roads, in the Bisikanu Park in Lausa, or you can go right back to Festac, if you're thinking about cultural developments at scale, so and I think there has to be a part for everyday, people to take ownership of spaces, as well, and create, these opportunities to come together and create, interactions and events that will now generate a desire to have more of these spaces. Because sometimes you don't realize you need something until you see it, and you think, hang on, why? We used to have, when I speak to people, my dad, my uncles, they say, oh, we used to do this back in the day. There was race course, there was this, there was that, and then you ask the question, then what happened to all these? What happened to all these things? So it's I think it's a multi-pronged approach. I mean, the building that we're talking about, all of it started from a swimming pool that was built in 1928, right? And it was built in a park that was there, so it's not new. What happened was the system that was supposed to protect, preserve, conserve, these spaces broke down. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to regenerate it. We're trying to rebuild it, and we're trying to make sure that we humanize, architecture. I think over the last decade, architecture's been commodified. The city's been commodified, hasn't it? Every space, is fed into an Excel spreadsheet to see how much income can be generated. Who's the biggest tenant that you can get in there? Big office, shopping center, whatever else. And I think it's our responsibility as designers, as urbanists, to think about the social life of urban form, right? Buildings beyond mere objects, right? And spaces between these buildings, and making places out of these spaces, rather than just talking about it, actually doing it, and bringing it down to the perspective of the end user. You know what I mean? That 5-6-year-old boy that go to the swimming pool, with his mom on a weekend and swim, that guy that can take his kids to the museum, a bunch of teenagers that can run around the glass looking for the villages of their uncles, aunties, whatever else, or program events, poetry slams, dance troops, readings of Wole Soyinka's Death and King's Horsemen, whatever it is, or some sort of food, event, in the middle of the space. You start to create all these things, all these programmed events that make people realize that there's opportunities for recreational activity. There's somewhere to just go hang out on a Saturday afternoon rather than just walk through a mall. You know what I mean? And in different space. So I think there's responsibility from both ends. At the high level, an enabling environment has to be created somehow. But I think at the people level as well, there has to be a demand, and an ownership of these spaces to create these activities. I mean, you walk around Lagos, you see people playing football under the bridge. You see people just sort of congregating under a tree, reading newspapers. Look at what you guys have done under Fallowmore Bridge that has now become, a convergence point. You know what I mean? So it's I think it's got to be attacked from both ends, and then hopefully we meet somewhere in the middle.
Okay, thank you so much, Seun. I think, one of the things that really, I think we all need to recognize is a comment you made about how this need to protect and conserve and make sustainable, these opportunities and create these access to public spaces. Because the collective memory, there's nothing beats it. Nothing beats the collective gathering, the sense of shared experience. I mean, even now during the whole COVID scenario, right? There's as sad as it is and tragic as it's been, there has been a collective experience, and sort of these collective experiences that we enable, which cultures continue to enable since the beginning of time, sort of empowers us in so many ways, intellectually, spiritually, but also just in terms of it creates empathy. And from a design and urbanism point of view, the more accessible public spaces, the more spaces for interaction that we create, the more opportunities to create collective memory, I think the stronger a city becomes. And that's why we're really excited about the theme of this year, Open House Lagos. And really excited to be part of Rise Africa, which has programs all week. So I hope you guys can register, go online, and check out all the amazing webinars and panelists that have been scheduled. Seun, I just want to say a huge thank you for joining us and having a chat. Thank you so much for everybody else that joined the session. Some great questions. I know I haven't got to all the questions, but thank you so much. And you can continue to follow the project. I think CISA's Instagram handle is at si.sa.
__ si.sa. Yeah, we're working on a website that hopefully can keep updates on the project, and then also social media handles for the JK Randall Center. That's being worked on. But yeah, our Instagram handle _ si.sa. We try and post this construction updates, photos on there until the system is set up and up and running. Creating systems is not.
Yeah, nice. And also just keep in touch with at Open House Lagos. Thank you, everybody. Have an amazing evening. I hope you enjoyed the session. I really did. I talk to Cheryl all the time, but I'm always kind of surprised how every time I talk to him, I'm learning new things. Please register for the Rise Africa 2021 festival. Just go to riseafrica.iclei.org, join, and watch all the amazing stuff that they got programmed. Bye-bye, everybody.